If you're a PC gamer, you've probably dreamt of owning an RTX 4090, but who actually needs to spend that much money to get an enjoyable play experience? Is a 3440 by 1440p Ultrawide enough resolution for you to justify to yourself the extra spend on an RTX 4090? Or do you need a crazy resolution like this 5120 by 2160 Ultrawide to not be wasting your money? Well, the 7900 XTX is here to challenge the notion that anyone needs to spend $600 to get monstrous frame rates on your Ultrawide. So, let's jump into those benchmarks and see if the RTX 4090 can be justified at your monitor's resolution. Starting off our benchmarks, we have Cyberpunk 2077, probably the most Nvidia branded game out there. We'll be testing its raster performance first, using Ultra preset with FSR turned off. When we look at the average refresh rate between the cards, we see only a 9% difference across all resolutions, with the Super Ultrawide resolution being the 4090's biggest lead, and the 5120 by 2160 resolution showing these cards neck and neck. When we look at the 1% lows, we actually see the 7900 XTX best the 4090 in both 3440 by 1440 and 3840 by 1600 resolutions, with the RTX 4090 ahead at our two higher resolutions. Both cards provide playable frame rates at every resolution, but with such a tight race, it makes you wonder why Nvidia has their name plastered all over this game. That is, until you turn on Ultra Ray Tracing, where you see the RTX 4090's performance advantage go from 9% to over 90%. The 7900 XTX's performance is hammered, dropping to nearly 1/4 of its raster performance, while the RTX 4090 is only losing half of its performance. At 3440 by 1440, even with impressive gains with FSR quality turned on, the 7900 XTX can't even match the base ray tracing performance of the RTX 4090, much less get to 60 FPS average. While the RTX 4090 is nearly getting 60 FPS at this resolution, and when DLSS quality is used, we see high refresh rates. As we progress through the resolutions, we see things getting bleaker for the 7900 XTX's ray tracing prospects, while the RTX 4090 stays above 60 with DLSS quality all the way to our Super Ultrawide resolution. Only at our greater than 4K 5120 by 2160 resolution does the 4090 finally fall below 60 FPS. Cyberpunk 2077 presents a strong raster case for the 7900 XTX, but an even stronger ray tracing one for the RTX 4090. Next we have Shadow the Tomb Raider, one of the OG ray tracing titles, but first we'll look at its raster performance on its highest preset. Here we see a better raster performance result for the RTX 4090, with its advantage increasing as the resolution increases. 3440 by 1440 we see the 4090 with a 19% performance advantage, which seems likely to be slightly CPU limited. At 3840 by 1600 that lead grows to 24%, with the Super Ultrawide resolution seeing the 4090 lead by 28%, and finally, at 5120 by 2160 we see the RTX 4090 now with a lead of 31%. Despite being outperformed by an average of 26% by the 4090, the 7900 XTX is still crushing it in FPS performance at every resolution. When we turn on Ultra Ray Tracing Shadows, we see a 30% performance loss on the 4090 and a 38% performance loss on the 7900 XTX. Here we see what was once a completely performance crippling feature is now a triviality, even for the 7900 XTX, with no need to use upscaling until you're trying to render resolutions beyond 4K. At 3440 by 1440 we see the 7900 XTX in high refresh rates, with the RTX 4090 in very high refresh rates. And at 3440 by 1600 we see the 7900 XTX maintain high refresh rates, even at our Super Ultrawide resolution, where we see the 7900 XTX dip to smooth refresh rates. Its 1% low stays above 60. Only at 5120 by 2160 does the 7900 XTX need to rely on upscaling to get its average and 1% low above 60, while the RTX 4090 never needs the crutch. If you do want to use upscaling, this is where the 4090 sees its real advantage. Like many of the first ray tracing games, Shadow of the Tomb Raider doesn't support FSR because it didn't exist when the game came out. Luckily for the 7900 XTX, Intel bought XeSS's way into the game to help its cards out, since this is still a heavily benchmarked title. Though unfortunately for the 7900 XTX, XeSS doesn't perform nearly as well as FSR does on AMD cards. The raster performance provided by the 7900 XTX is great at every resolution, and the ray tracing performance is more than playable for most resolutions, and holds up much better against the 4090, than it did in Cyberpunk 2077. Next up for our racing fans, we have Forza Horizon 5 played on its Extreme preset. This game is a very consistent performer, though this generation has flip-flopped whose cards run it better. We see a very consistent and fairly significant 45% advantage for the RTX 4090 in this game. Even with such a big advantage for the RTX 4090, the 7900 XTX has no problem putting down a very playable frame rates, with all 1% low staying above 60. When turning on extreme ray tracing for this game, one would expect even more significant domination by the 4090, but due to the way this game uses ray tracing, we see only an 8% performance drop for the 4090 and a 10% drop for the 7900 XTX, leaving the performance delta pretty much where it was before. Both cards provide playable frame rates without any upscaling, and at lower resolutions the upscaling is actually hurting performance. As we go through the resolutions, we see upscaling improve to the point where it's mostly pointless, but no longer damaging. The 7900 XTX manages to keep its 1% lows above 60 the whole way along, providing smooth and fully sufficient frame rates for this type of game, but not really taking advantage of high refresh rate monitors the way the 4090 can. Next up we have the 2023 action RPG Forspoken, which has seen some pretty good performance increases since launch, and will be tested using its ultra settings. In Forspoken, we see the performance advantage start out in the low 20s at 3440 by 1440, and work its way up to the high 20s at our 5120 by 2160 resolution, for an average performance advantage for the 4090 of 25%, which is solid but nothing to write home about. The 7900 XTX even sees a better 1% low deviation across all resolutions than the 4090 sees. When turning on the two ray tracing settings in this game, we see the 4090's performance drop 15%, and the 7900 XTX's performance drop 23%. Not too bad a performance hit considering how the Raster performance is already stressing these GPUs. The 7900 XTX and the RTX 4090 are both starting out at 3440 by 1440 with high refresh rates, and better than Raster averages when using upscaling, though both cards have 1% lows worse than the Raster results, with the 7900 XTX seeing its 1% low advantage moving more in line with the 4090. Moving up to 3840 by 1440, we see the 7900 XTX drop into smooth frame rates, while the 4090 hangs on to high refresh rates. The same holds true for our super ultrawide resolution. And finally at 5120 by 2160, we see the 7900 XTX drop to acceptable frame rates, and the RTX 4090 to smooth refresh rates. In Forspoken, with a 36% ray tracing performance advantage for the RTX 4090, it is able to provide ray tracing frame rates equivalent to the 7900 XTX's FSR results. And at the higher two resolutions, the DLSS results are providing a significant experiential upgrade over what the 7900 XTX can provide. Whereas in our Raster results, the 7900 XTX has a much tighter 1% lows, making it much more competitive against the 4090 up to our super ultrawide resolution, but still leaving the 5120 by 2160 resolution for the 4090 to make its case. For our last game that includes both Raster and Ray Tracing, we will be looking at Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, played on its ultra settings. At our lower two resolutions, we are seeing performance advantage for the RTX 4090, stymied by what appears to be a 200 FPS cap, leaving the 7900 XTX only 15% behind at 3440 by 1440, but that difference jumps to 30% at 3840 by 1600, and 36% at 5120 by 1440, and finally a 38% advantage for the RTX 4090 at 5120 by 2160, for an average performance advantage of 30%. The 7900 XTX has a 1% low deviation advantage at all resolutions except for the 5120 by 2160, where they reach an equilibrium with the average FPS results. Raster performance results for both cards are pretty stellar in this game, making the need for an RTX 4090 a hard sell, especially when you consider you may end up bottlenecked. When ray tracing reflections and transparent reflections are turned on, we see a pretty harsh performance hit for both cards, with the RTX 4090 losing 42% performance on average, and the 7900 XTX losing 59%, causing the 7900 XTX to fall way behind the RTX 4090, leaving it with an 82% performance advantage in ray tracing. Nearly as harsh a performance hit as Cyberpunk 2077, but with far less of a visual increase. Despite the large performance hit, the 7900 XTX still manages playable frame rates at both 3440 by 1440 and 3840 by 1600 without using any upscaling, and can go all the way to 5120 by 2160 with playable frame rates when using FSR quality, while the RTX 4090 is able to play at this resolution without upscaling, and when using DLSS quality, the RTX 4090 is nearly back in very high refresh rates. The raster performance of the RX 7900 XTX is more than enough for this game, and while it can get by at all resolutions when ray tracing and using FSR quality, it falls far behind the RTX 4090's performance level when ray tracing. Next, we'll be comparing performance in the stealth action game Assassin's Creed Valhalla, played on its ultra-high preset. At 3440 by 1440, we see the 7900 XTX coming in right behind the RTX 4090, with the RTX 4090 only getting a 10% performance advantage. At 3840 by 1600, we see that advantage only increase to 11%, but our Super Ultrawide boosts the RTX 4090's advantage to 17%. And at 5120 by 2160, we see a 16% advantage for the 4090, for an average performance advantage of 14%, or curiously, exactly 12 FPS at all resolutions but our Super Ultrawide, which is not a great result for Team Green. Both cards suffer from the relatively poor 1% low performance of this game. With performance so close, and the 700 XTX able to play this game at every resolution, it's putting the pressure back on the RTX 4090. Next, we test the Robo Dino Romp Horizon Zero Dawn on its ultimate quality preset. Here we see a pretty consistent 23% performance difference between the RTX 4090 and the 7900 XTX across all the resolutions. We do see 1% low performance regression for the RTX 4090 between the 3840 and 1600p resolution and the 3440 and 1440p resolution, though it's probably not bottlenecking because the 700 XTX is seeing the same thing. And the same phenomenon plays out between the 5120 by 2160 and our Super Ultrawide resolution. Both GPUs are providing a high quality play experience at every resolution in Horizon Zero Dawn, making it hard for the 4090 to justify its price. Next up for testing is the wacky and wild Borderlands 3 played on its badass preset. Here we see a steady climb in performance advantage for the RTX 4090 as the resolution goes up, with the 3440 by 1440 providing the 4090 with a 25% advantage. At 3840 by 1600, we see a 26% advantage. At 5120 by 1440, a 27% advantage. And at 5120 by 2160, we see a bit of a jump up to 31% advantage over the 7900 XTX. While a 27% advantage is quite solid, it doesn't change the fact that the 7900 XTX is providing a more than adequate gaming experience at every level. So all that extra performance is expanding on an already high frame rate experience to an even higher one, rather than getting you over the playability hump. Next up, we have a game for our strategy buffs, Total War Warhammer III played on its Ultra preset using its battle simulation. Again, we see a slow progression in performance advantage for the RTX 4090, with a leap at the 5120 by 2160 resolutions, with a 29% advantage at 3440 by 1440, which then becomes a 32% advantage when moving up in resolution to 3840 by 1600. And then a 33% advantage on our Super Ultrawide, and finally, a 39% advantage at 5120 by 2160. The 7900 XTX performs fine at our 3 lower resolutions, but we do see the RTX 4090's performance advantage really pay off at the 5120 by 2160 resolution, where it takes the 700 XTX's acceptable play experience and turns it into a very smooth experience that stays above 60 all the time. And for our final game, we have Rainbow Six Extraction, played on its Ultra preset with resolution quality set at fixed 100%. Again, we see the trend of the 7900 XTX performing closer to the 4090 at the lower resolutions, and the RTX 4090 pulling away as we go beyond 4K. With the RTX 4090 starting out with a 28% performance advantage at 3440 by 1440, then progressing to a 32% advantage, and then a 34% advantage, and finally a 40% performance advantage when you hit 5120 by 2160. Even with the significant performance advantage the 4090 is showing over the 700 XTX, you would have to be a professional gamer to take advantage of that performance delta, as the 700 XTX is still providing super high refresh rates at the most common resolution, and even higher refresh rates at the most demanding resolution. When looking at our 10-game roundup, we see the 700 XTX with unimpeachable performance results at the 3440 by 1440 resolution. Sure, the RTX 4090 is faster by 22%, but there's zero to complain about on the XTX's side. Even at 3840 by 1600, the 7900 XTX is providing a sterling performance, And this is all before any bit of upscaling or any other performance enhancing tricks are used. Sure, the RTX 4090 is averaging 27% faster, but I don't think anyone using a 7900 XTX would even bother looking over the fence to see what they are missing, because they are too busy enjoying great frame rates. At 5120 by 1440, we see the first small chink in the 7900 XTX's performance, where two of the most demanding games have their 1% lows dip slightly below 60, giving the RTX 4090 the opportunity to step in and be the panacea for the overachiever in all of us, with its 29% better performance. And when playing at 5120 by 2160, a resolution 30% higher than 4K, we finally see the 7900 XTX unable to keep its average refresh rate above 60 in 3 games, with 4 games having 1% lows below 60. With a 31% better performance, the RTX 4090 is able to deliver 60 FPS averages in all games, though even it can't say the same for the 1% lows, with 2 games falling shy of 60. Both of these cards are providing a tremendous level of performance, all before even thinking about using DLSS or FSR, both of which can provide a very nice image when working from a 5120 by 2160 source. When looking at the price to performance, we see despite an average performance advantage of 27% for the RTX 4090, you're still paying 25% more per frame rendered than the 7900 XTX, which is a pretty resounding price to performance victory for the 7900 XTX, especially considering how well the actual performance at each resolution is. But the performance battle is not over. We still have our ray tracing results to pick through. When we look at the ray tracing performance, we see where the RTX 4090's true advantage lies, where it sees a 55% performance advantage over the 7900 XTX. Though if all you require is an above 60 FPS ray tracing experience, the 7900 XTX is able to accommodate you in all games except Cyberpunk 2077, where even at 3440 by 1440, it comes up just shy of 60 FPS, with FSR quality on. We see the same trend continue at 3840 by 1600, where all other games stay above 60, and Cyberpunk becomes less playable. Even at our super ultrawide 5120 by 1440 resolution, the 7900 XTX sees 4 games stay above 60, but when you look across the way at the RTX 4090 results, you're staring down the barrel of not only high refresh rates, but very high refresh rate averages produced by the RTX 4090, and an enjoyable Cyberpunk 2077 experience. At our highest resolution of 5120 by 2160, even the RTX 4090 is unable to deliver 60 FPS in Cyberpunk, with the XTX completely unplayable, and starting to fall apart in a few other titles. When we finally get around to looking at price to performance, we see what I think most people will find a shocking result, and that is that the 7900 XTX actually has better price to performance when ray tracing than the RTX 4090 does, by a slim margin of 3%. I know in my mind, it was always the RTX 4090, great ray tracing. RX 700 XTX can't compete when ray tracing. But it turns out the 700 XTX was priced exactly where it needed to be to match the competition. With this surprising result, what is the performance conclusion? Before we jump to the conclusion, I just want to give a big thanks to all my subscribers. Ultrawide Tech has just crossed the 1,000 subscriber mark. Yes! It is the big step towards getting this channel monetized and accelerating the rate that I can acquire new hardware and test it for all of you. The channel still needs more watch hours in order to get monetized. So keep on watching my videos and maybe check out a playlist or two. If you want to help this channel out more directly, I've started a Patreon where you can get access to a private Discord where you can chat with me and other patrons about all things Ultrawide and influence the way that this channel develops. You'll also get access to vlogs type videos from me, as well as I'll be doing some benchmarking live streams where you can chat with me while I benchmark cards and other games. Another way you can help this channel out is by using the Amazon links in the description below. Now, let's see which of these 2 cards is right for you. The 7900 XTX is getting over 120 FPS in 6 out of the 10 games, and even our slowest game is still in high refresh rates with a 90 FPS average at our most popular ultrawide resolution of 3440 by 1440. That's at max settings with no upscaling. It's hard to see how the RTX 4090 is worth 600 extra bucks just to get 2 more games over the 120 Hz mark. Even jumping up to super ultrawide resolution, you cannot make the 7900 XTX sweat 60. Only 2 of the most demanding games even have their 1% lows dip 2 to 3 frames below 60. At these 3 resolutions, the RX 7900 XTX makes the RTX 4090's extra $600 asking price look preposterous. At the monstrous resolution of 5120 by 2160, the RTX 4090 can make a case for itself as being the only card that can hit 60 FPS in all games at this resolution. Though even it has a couple of games that's 1% lows dip into acceptable range. But there's one dent in this argument, and that is the 7900 XTX has FSR available to it, and at this high of a resolution, even FSR looks damn close to native. On the opposite side of the coin, we have ray tracing performance. And despite the 7900 XTX getting the technical win of having better ray tracing price performance than the RTX 4090, the experiential difference between these two cards is huge. The over 50% additional performance that the RTX 4090 is providing is a game changer. And it makes turning on ray tracing a completely painless experience and gives us a glimpse into a future where all the higher end settings have ray tracing on as a default. And it is a beautiful future to behold. So back to the question we asked at the beginning of the video. Who needs to spend $600 or more extra dollars to get the extra performance that the RTX 4090 is providing? Well, according to a poll of my audience, only about the 20% of you that said that ray tracing was 50% or more of your consideration when buying a GPU need to be thinking about reaching for the buy button on the RTX 4090. The other 80% of you that said ray tracing was 30% or less of your consideration when buying a new GPU can confidently move forward with the 7900 XTX. It'll give you amazing raster performance at 3440 by 1440, 3840 by 1600, and 5120 by 1440, and still allow you to dabble in ray tracing when you want to. Only those in this group that are creators/gamers running a 5120 by 2160 monitor will see any real benefit when moving up to the RTX 4090, especially since it tends to be more compatible and faster at more creative workloads. Everything was tested on my test system featuring an AMD R7 5800X 3D CPU with 32GB of 3200 MHz CL14 memory and running Windows 11 with the latest drivers. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And let me know in the comments if you enjoy this raster and ray tracing combined analysis. Also, stay tuned for the RTX 4090 versus 4080 comparison. And if you've decided the 4090 is too expensive, then check out the 7900 XTX versus the RTX 4080 comparison video I have. Thank you so much. I'm Scott, and I'll see you next time, Ultrawide fans.